In today's charts today, we're going to start with crude oil. We had a breakout yesterday to the upside, and that is having some big impact on the charts. We'll then look at the dollar, really big moves in the dollar yesterday with that US inflation number, which we'll also take a look at the chart there. Bitcoin testing this $30,000 mark, and we'll take a look at what the charts are telling us there. Then the stock indices, commodities, bond yields, some of the tech giants, and we'll come back full circle at the end to the energy mix and look at what's going on in European gas and power. So starting with the oil move, really significant here. We had that breakout yesterday of the trend. Here is the 60-minute chart. That was the jump on the announcement that we'd see production cuts and from the oil majors. And then we saw here that we just broke yesterday, and that's really quite key. We've now gone higher. But the really big factor is what it means on the daily cloud chart. We've moved back above the cloud, and that's really quite significant there. We were bullish up until May last year, where we fell through the cloud. We broke lower. We're in a new downtrend environment, an environment of lower highs, lower lows. That's the definition of a downtrend, of course. And now we've put in that floor at 70, and we've crossed the cloud for the first time. In fact, on the WTI chart, it is actually slightly clearer, but we have moved above the cloud. That means that we can pull back now all the way to $80 on the price and still be above the cloud. So even though people will say, oh, I told you so, we're going to go lower, the reality is this 70 the bottom? Will we put in a lower low and then a higher high? That's what we're looking for. And of course, markets will climb this wall of worry. We see this when we just put the automated trends on. We've got all these previous resistance levels to break through. So really significant there. Potentially for crude oil. We could be in a new uptrend, and we really do just have to watch that. And of course, we can look at the targets. If we just hit the T key on the targets all put on automatically. See how those upside targets were met. They were given in 2021 and met. The downside targets were pretty aggressive, and we do still have these targets to 64 hanging over, 65, 64, so we can't ignore those, and a lot of resistance. But we've crossed that cloud, and we're just going to start seeing potentially some new upside targets. This one is not done yet. We need the column to lock, but that will be really quite interesting. And of course, if we look at the shorter term, we still got the downside targets on the longer term, medium term charts, but on the 60-minute chart, we're starting to see these targets kicking in now. 87, 90, 90, 100. Obviously, if we get back to 100, that's starting to change the picture very significantly on crude oil. So that's really what we've got to watch. You've got to watch those multiple time frames. Now, moving over to what's happening in the general markets, we had the dollar yesterday falling quite heavily. Really quite interesting now. We've got downside targets on the short-term chart, just waiting for this longer-term downside target to activate on the 1% log scale. And of course, we make the lower low. That is bad news for the dollar. We're now priced below the cloud on the weekly long-term chart. And the medium-term chart, we've been bearish for some time. It's this February low we're now watching. And we've got targets pointing below that now on the short-term chart, so really quite key. Of course, we had that inflation number out yesterday, and one of the things that's quite interesting to do is to just overlay. You can, from Updata, you can overlay from all the different data sources that you run in, but let's put inflation on. And what we can do here is we can just drag, and what's interesting is that dip that we saw in the 70s, we went on several years later to make higher inflation numbers. So not a done deal that was the peak, and we will be watching that, and it's going to take an awful lot for the Fed to get inflation back to the 2% target. So really quite interesting there. But we're seeing that dollar looking weaker, and that's meaning that sterling is breaking that 125 level for the first time. We had GDP numbers out in the UK this morning, pretty weak, but sterling's still going up on the basis that we're probably going to see interest rates still going higher in the UK, and so that's really quite key. We mentioned Bitcoin, so Bitstamp, Bitcoin we're seeing here just playing with that $30,000 mark. The upside target there, 54 and 50 and 31, those targets are all in place, and 31 really the level there. And so the fact is, although we're still below the weekly cloud, on the daily we're looking bullish, the 60-minute we're looking bullish. If you're trading Bitcoin, keep an eye on the 1-minute targets. That's going to be quite key. Of course, the markets took the US inflation numbers in their stride yesterday. They're starting to discount any further rises from the Fed, but the NatGas still looking pretty weak, not managing to make a new high. That is significant. We have activated the long-term upside target, but we do have downside targets hanging over us as well. So a pretty mixed picture. We've got the S&P future up 0.25% today, the NASDAQ up 1/3%. The S&P needs to break this 4,200 level. That's really quite critical. The previous high that we saw in February, until we see that higher high, it's too early to say that we're out of the bear zone. And we see that playing through on the weekly cloud as well. So we are still in a bear market long term. Medium term, we're looking bullish, and short term, it's a pretty flat picture at the moment. FTSE future is up slightly this morning. UK actually looking bullish above the clouds, quite different from the US. And if we look at the DAX in Germany, similarly bullish above the cloud on all three time frames. A shortage of long-term targets. We've got a medium-term target there. That's not too bad. Asia was pretty mixed. We saw Japan little changed. The crisis with a missile there from North Korea tempering the market a little bit, but we're seeing other markets falling away. The Hang Seng was down slightly. China was down 0.25%, just struggling to get back above the cloud, even though we do have these upside targets. And if we look at the Sensex, that was down, and the Aussie market was also down. So quite significant that we're just seeing markets in Asia Pacific are relatively subdued. We'll come and look at the energy mix in a minute. We've talked about sugar. That continues to power ahead, bullish on all three time frames. We had a bit of a down day yesterday, but we're seeing here upside targets some 16%, 8% higher for sugar, and we're going to get a new target on this column as well. So it's really a picture of bullish, bullish, bullish there. Not great news for inflation. Gold, of course, has been the big story of late, holding that 2,000 level now for the first time in a while, and really now starting to look like 2,000 is becoming a psychological floor. We've got targets to 2,080, 2,060, 2,040 on the short-term charts. On the medium term, we've got 2,100, 2,350, and we're really waiting for a longer-term target there. So that's really quite significant. Silver holding that 25 level, surging to 2560. Moving above on the weekly cloud, we're going to have a very big upside target on this column. So really quite key there that we're seeing silver now looking pretty bullish. Precious metals generally, we're seeing that improvement across the board. And we look at platinum, it's lagging, and palladium is even lagging more. But the reality is we're seeing precious metals coming to the fore. The US 10-year yields down significantly on that announcement yesterday. We fell immediately, we recovered a bit, and then we unwound. So we are seeing now downside potential for these targets. We still have the big upside target hanging over us, but we're seeing now that the shorter term downside targets are coming to the fore for yields. So bond yields in the US falling lower. Now looking at the energy mix, we talked about Brent crude. We mentioned on WTI that it was clear of that cloud cross. We're just a little bit higher above the cloud. Looking at US NatGas, we were bearish out there to clients this morning. In our morning report, we were bullish on crude oil. We got the upside targets on the 1 minute chart, but on NatGas, we were bearish for those downside targets, and we were actually neutral on emissions. If you want the reports, just let me know and we'll sign you up. It's really quite key. We put these out every morning to clients, and so calling the market for the day ahead. So US NatGas not looking great, those downside targets and below the cloud on both the daily and the 60 minute. And looking at emissions, we felt this was pulling back as well. We had these downside targets on the 1 minute chart, so really quite significant. Just failing really to get above that 100 level. We're going to have to wait. We're in a range now, somewhere between 85 and 100 on the longer term picture. Looking at gas, TTF down this morning, MBP also lower. We're below the cloud. We've got downside targets. We were neutral because it could break either way out of these little mini ranges, but the picture has deteriorated since this morning's report, and so you've got to keep watching those 1 minute targets. If you're trading gas and power, you need to watch those targets. German power looking more bullish. We held that 145 level. We mentioned that was a previous resistance level, now critical support level. We held that and breaking higher, so that's good news. That's it for today. Remember, if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, you can follow me and you'll see these videos more frequently. Until tomorrow, happy charting. Bye for now.